Screen is visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So last time we have studied about the fish toxicology, in that effect of pesticides. Some of the points which I have covered, these are: in first lecture I have told you about toxicology, then various toxic agents, toxic substances, then organic toxins, inorganic toxins, then the toxicants which affect the specific type of tissues, these target tissues, then intrinsic toxicity, dose, response of host to that toxicants, and there are various several exposure conditions in which the routes of exposure, frequency and duration of exposure, then mixed exposure and environmental circumstances. Then I have also told you about the acute toxicity, subchronic toxicity, in that carcinogenetic developmental toxicity, and genetic toxicity, in that the somatic cells. Soma means body tissue, and in that the toxicity of that cells, in that genetic toxicity. And then I've started the fisheries and aquatic resources, then aquatic toxicology, that part I have completed last time. Okay, impact of water pollution on health of fish, then pesticide toxicity in fish. There are various advantages and disadvantages of pesticides, routes of pesticides, fish exposure, and here is integrated pest management. So that last time I have stopped here, but now I'm going to start from this point, integrated pest management. And that integrated pest management, it is a system using variety of methods, including the pesticides, to reduce the pest population to the various acceptable levels. So factors, various factors in that: groundwater contamination, then increasing cost of agricultural chemicals, and that pesticide residues on food, as well as the environment and use of integrated pest management. So that is important in that integrated pest management. So there is also insecticides, which are systemic insecticides, and these systemic insecticides, these are used to treat the plants and insects, and the insects which ingest that insecticides while feeding on the plants. So the systemic insecticides means the insecticides which are sprayed on that specific plants and the insects which are feeding on that plants. In the body of that insects, these various insecticides are entered, and so that the effects are seen in the body of that insects, and death of that insect takes place. So another, that is contact insecticides. These are in direct contact with insects, means the direct spraying of insecticides takes place, and these insecticides are in contact with that insect. Then natural insecticides, and these natural insecticides, these are nicotine, pyrethrum, and neem extract. These are called as biological pesticides, and these pesticides are used for the control of insects also. So another, that is plant incorporated protectants. These are insecticidal substances, and these are produced by plants after genetic modifications. Then inorganic insecticides are manufactured with metals, and that include the arsenate and copper compounds, as well as fluorine compounds, sulfur, and these are commonly used for the control of insects. Another, that is organic insecticides. These are synthetic chemicals, and that comprise the largest number of pesticides available for the use nowadays. Okay, so these are, the table shows the different insecticides and their mode of action. For example, organochlorine, and it acts on the neurons by causing the sodium or potassium imbalance, and accumulation of acetylcholine at the neuromuscular junction takes place. Means that insecticide act on the brain or nervous system, causing a rapid twitching of voluntary muscles. Okay, voluntary means these are under the control of brain, and the paralysis as well as tremors, in that convulsions takes place. So effect of that organochlorine is on the nervous system. Then second one, that is organophosphate, that causes the ACHE inhibition. It is one of the neurotransmitter, and there is a accumulation of that neurotransmitter takes place, and the muscle twitching, and it causes the muscle twitching and paralysis. Then organosulfur, that exhibits the ovicidal activity. Carbamate, that causes also a neurotransmitter inhibition, and effects are on the central nervous system. And here is also the rapid twitch of voluntary muscles, and the paralysis takes place. And it is highly toxic to fish and other aquatic animals which are present in that particular water body. Then formamidine, and that inhibits, it acts on an enzyme monoamino oxidase, and that degrade the neurotransmitter, causing the accumulation of that compound, accumulation of that particular enzyme. Then dinotrophenol, and that insecticide inhibits the phosphorylation, and they also prevent the formation of ATPs. Then organotins, it also inhibits the phosphorylation, and they also prevents the formation of ATP, and it is used to control the mites, and it is very toxic to fishes. Then pyrethroids, this is also one of the insecticide, and that opens the sodium channels in neuronal membrane, and that affects the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system, and it causes the hyperexcitability, causing the tremors, incoordination, paralysis, and it is very toxic to fishes. Then spinosins and nicotinoids, these are also insecticides that disrupts the neurotransmitters in postsynaptic cells. You know, postsynapse, it is the junctional region between the two neurons. And when any activity takes place in a body of human being, as well as in fish, as well as in any animal, that time the transmission of neurotransmitters, these are the chemicals secreted in the region of brain, and that is very much important. And there is also important activity of that neurotransmitter is that when that neurotransmitter secreted, there must have to be a inhibitory activity. If that activity continues, if the neurotransmitter started continue, then that tremors, then the convulsions, that activity continuously takes place. So there is a necessity to inhibit that activity. Okay. Then nicotinoids, that also acts on the central nervous system, and it is very toxic to fishes as well as the other animals which are present in the region of aquatic, in the water body. Hmm. These are various another chemicals also, or various pesticides which inhibit the mitochondrial electron transport, then interrupt also sorry, it also acts on the peripheral nervous system. Then it blockage of neurotransmitter also, it causes the twitching and the convulsions. These are some botanicals in that: pyrethrum, nicotine, rotenone, and limonene. These are also responsible for causing the effects on the central nervous system as well as peripheral nervous system. Then various activators are also, that inhibits the prevention of that prevents the various enzyme activities, and it is also toxic to fish. Use of various antibiotics also, that also block the neurotransmitters. GABA means gamma aminobutyric acid is and that blocks that GABA and at the neuromuscular junction. Then fungicides, that acts as a narcotics, and another that is spinosins and nicotinoids. These are also responsible for the damage in the central as well as peripheral nervous system. Okay, next one, that is effects of pesticides. That specific pesticides, and that acts on various targeted tissues in the body of fish. In that, on acetylcholinesterase, that activity, it is very sensitive for the organophosphate. That organophosphate, it is a pesticide and a carbamate pesticide, and it there is a blockage of that neurotransmitter takes place, and as there is a inhibition of enzyme, and it affects on the body of fishes. Another, that is the muscle activity in the fish, that is also inhibited because of the action of, or as there is an inhibition of that particular neurotransmitter. And the fishes which are reared in a heavy polluted areas, these fishes are specifically affected by these pesticides, and there is a reduction in a swimming performance, as well as there is a damage in brain as well as gills of the fish, which are, and the fishes specifically which are exposed to prolonged that organophosphates. Next one, that is chromosomal aberrations and carcinogenic effect. In that, the pesticide dichlorvos, that in that the concentration of 0.1 ppm, that pesticide causes the chromosomal aberrations in kidney of various fishes, and the fishes which are specifically exposed to 24, 48, 72 and 92 hours. Also, the toxicity of that pesticide is related to alteration in DNA replications, and which causes the mutation as well as cellular hyperproliferation as a result of local mutation. Then effect on protein contents. and there is a decrease in protein level of liver, then muscle, intestine, and gills of the fish, which are exposed to the oleandrin. This is also a one type of fish pesticide. It is a pesticide which affect on a aquatic water body and the various fishes as well as the aquatic animals. These are exposed to that particular pesticide affected by this level, means protein level of the liver, muscles, and intestine, that is decreases. In that also endosulfan is also affected by this way. Next one, that is effect of pesticide on a specific, that salmon fish, and long-term exposure of that particular pesticide can increase the stress in juveniles of that fish, and thereby they are more susceptible to predation. So the pesticide, they affect on their swimming ability also, and they reduce the ability to feed to avoid the predators because of the effect of that pesticide. And they avoid predators to also to defend the territories and to maintain the position in river system. Next, that is effect on immune system of the fishes, and these pesticides also affect as a endocrine disruptors. So sometimes there is a very low exposure of that pesticides takes place. So exposure to low concentration of pesticides, they can disrupt the immune system of the fish. Then that may also act as a blockers of the sex hormones, and there is a abnormal sex development takes place. Feminization of male, then abnormal sex ratio is also there, and unusual mating behavior takes place. So pesticides can indirectly affect the fish by interfering with the food supply also. Then toxicity of pesticides to cyprinid and the catfishes, in that aldrin, dieldrin, and DDT and chlordan. And if the fishes are exposed to that pesticides for 10, 20, and 30 days, then there is a change in color of gill lamellae from reddish to light brown. Then there is an excessive coagulated mucus on gills also accumulated. In high doses, the generation of immature oocytes and a rupture of follicular epithelium and the disturbance in endocrine and hormonal imbalances there. Then various organophosphorus compound with bluegill fish induced adhesion of the primary follicle. So cytoplasmic degeneration is also takes place in the fishes, and the impairment of metabolism in fish, and which is appear to be due to inhibition of the transcription. So these are the effects of pesticides on the fishes in the metabolism of fishes. Then methyl parathion. If for example, if cutla fish is affected by this pesticide, the level of 1 to 10 ppm, and there is a loss of equilibrium takes place in that fishes, then irregular swimming activities also, then rapid jerky movements are seen in that fishes. Then these fishes frequently come at the surface of the water. There is also change in body color, and there is a secretion of mucus, and the 50% mortality is seen in that fishes. Another, that is histopathological changes are also observed in that fishes. In some fishes, there is a hyperstimulation, respiratory distress is also observed. Then insecticides in addition to natural pollutants. There is a varied contamination exists in the surface water, including various multiple compounds and different products of the industrial and agriculture, and that contribute to the environmental problems. So there are many pathways by which the insecticides leave their sites of application and distribute throughout the environmental and enter the aquatic ecosystem. Okay, so most of the insecticides ultimately find their ways to rivers, lakes, ponds, and have been found to be toxic to non-target organisms, and they inhibit the natural environment close to the agricultural field. Okay. Then next point, that is bioaccumulation of insecticide. So after exposure to different concentrations of the insecticides in water, the fish absorbs them in gill, skin, or gastrointestinal tract. Then the insecticides are rapidly metabolized, or there is a metabolism of that insecticides takes place, and they are also concentrated in various tissues of the fish. Or when these fishes are consumed by the human being, then these pesticides or these toxins can affect on the body of human beings. So that bioaccumulation occurs if the insecticides increases and it becomes more harmful to consumers as well as the animals. So that accumulated insecticides that can cause the death, sometimes long-term damage due to bioconcentration of these compounds in different tissues of the fish. So in some fish which are at the lower of the food chain, and bioaccumulation of that insecticides that may increase in the tissues of their predators as well as the consumers, and such as the human, and thus affecting their health and the survival. Okay, so bioaccumulation, the rate of bioaccumulation rate of insecticides in the fish, that depends upon the species, then life stages, and the amount of fat reservation in different tissues, and diet of fish, chemical and physical properties of the insecticides. Then acute toxicity. The acute toxicity of insecticides to fish, that means the toxicity rate was determined after the 96 hours, and this concentration, and this is dependent on the concentration of that pesticide. That the acute toxicity, in acute toxicity there is a sudden or there is a intense mortality, and sometimes in that there is an intense mortality takes place, and that may be observed in fish population exposed to the insecticides. The most apparent symptoms of the insecticides in fish are the lethargy. The symptoms which are observed in fishes, these are lethargy. Then the forward extension of fins, means the normal position of that fins is disrupted. Then body color becomes blue. Then the severe reaction to external stimuli. If there is any external stimuli that fish gives, the immediate reaction. Then muscle spasm also takes place. Then there is a fast swimming in circles. Then there is a neurological disorder and disruption of the nervous function and respiratory dysfunction, and sometimes the suffocation of that fishes takes place, and it causes the death or mortality. Then acute toxicity of different insecticides. It is also influenced by sex, age, then genetic properties, body sizes of the fish, and water quality, and the various physicochemical parameters of that water. Various physicochemical parameters. And the purity and the formulation of insecticides. So in that, the acute toxicity is basically depend upon the how much amount of dose is entered into the body of fish, along with the how much time of that particular fish is exposed to that particular insecticide. Then the sublethal toxicity, in that the organs, various organs or the biological system that may be affected at such exposure, and that can be respiratory, hepatic, hematopoietic, respiratory, hepatic, hematopoietic, nervous, then cardiovascular, reproductive, and immune system. So insecticides leads to changes in blood chemical parameters and hematological profile of the fish. So the various insecticides that leads to decrease the rate of growth, reproductive disorders also. They cause the spinal deformities and also histopathological changes in the gills, liver, as well as hemopoietic tissues. And these hemopoietic tissues, such as the spleen, then head of the kidneys and renal tubules, endocrine tissues, as well as the brain, then neurological, behavioral disorder, and genetic defect. These are the biological indicators of the exposure to insecticides. In most of the fishes, the chronic toxicity takes place, and that chronic toxicity means the long-term exposure of that fishes to that particular pesticide or toxic agent. If sometimes the low concentration of that pesticide is takes place, low concentration of pesticide is affected on the body of fish, but the exposure is long term, which causes the chronic toxicity, and it affects on the survival, growth, reproduction, nervous system, and various biological and physiological processes of the fish. So that time, the type of injury to fish in the chronic toxicity is similar to sublethal toxicity damage, but the frequency and the intensity intensity of injury and lesions resulting from chronic toxicity may be more or even less than the damage of sublethal toxicity. Sometimes in a sublethal toxicity, the effects are immediate, or death of that fishes takes place. But in chronic toxicity, there is a effects are slower, but after many years or after many months also, this affect very harmfully. Then there are different parameters in the fish because of the effects of insecticides. In that, alteration in blood biochemical parameters. In that, the different tissues of the body are injured, and this is because of the specific enzymes. And in that specific enzymes, there is a abnormality takes place. Then there is a tissue and organ damage takes place. The tissue injuries and damages in an organ, and there is a result in a survival, and that can be result in a reduced survival, growth, and the fitness of that particular animal. There is also a low reproductive success, low or increase in susceptibility to pathological changes. So these fishes are susceptible to various bacteria as well as viruses which are present in that environment because of the damage of the tissues and organs. Reproductive dysfunction we have already studied in the previous slides, that there is a decreased fecundity takes place. Then testicular and ovarian histological changes takes place. There is a impairment of vitellogenesis in the eggs, and a disruption in steroidogenesis process. So there is a late maturation of gonads, and because of that there is a alteration in reproductive as well as parental behavior. Then neurotoxicity, we have already studied this, in that the various GABA means various neurotransmitters, these are affected. There is an accumulation, and there is a no proper enzymatic reactions takes place, and so that convulsions, then spasms takes place in that particular animal. Then developmental disorders, which cause that in that there is an impairment in normal development, and there is a reduction in growth and the survival of the fish also. Then decrease, as there is a decrease in growth of fish, there is that behavior is because of the low feeding behavior. Then decrease in metabolic processes also. Then waste of energy and maximum stress is observed in that animals. And as there is a disturbances in metabolism, the carbohydrates, proteins and lipid metabolism, these are totally affected. In behavioral alteration, that the fishes are exposed to different types of insecticides, and there is a swimming behavior is also affected, and there is a species local interaction is also depresses. Then genotoxicity, in that the mutations and the mutation in a genetic material takes place, and that is a heritable change that transferred from one generation to next generation. So that is genotoxicity, and which is because of the effect of the chemicals. Immunosuppression, it is the common process, in that there is, as the effects of that pesticide takes place on the fishes, their immune system is depressed, and uncontrolled cell proliferation is there. There is also because of the low immune suppression, the host defense mechanism is also reduced, so that against the pathogens. So immune system, it is the important defense against the various pathogens, and it causes the immunosuppression, and so fishes are vulnerable to infectious diseases because of the immune depressive effect. Then growth of fish is affected, as there is a disturbances in metabolic system. Then histopathological alterations due to the insecticide toxicity, and we have seen there are various organs, in that the gills, liver, kidney, spleen of the fish, in that the disturbances takes place. Histological changes also takes place. The histological structure is totally disrupted, and as there is a histopathological alterations in a different organs, and due to that it affects on the survival as well as the fitness as well as the growth of the fish. And tissue injuries and damage in organ that causes the reduced survival. Okay, then gills of the fish, these are affected because it is important organ of the respiration. These gills of the fishes. These are the important organ, and there is a gas exchange takes place because of the gills, and excretion of waste nitrogen, and uptake and excretion of various xenobiotics is also due to that. Hmm. Then that toxicity causes the swelling and thickening of the gill filament, and epithelial lining of that gills is also disturbed. Hmm. And so that there is a complete necrosis occurs. Okay, so as there is a damage in the gills, then all these the functions which are related to that gills, these are also affected. Then intestine, gonads, here is the necrosis of the cells in that region takes place in the intestine as well as in the gonad. So functions related to that intestine and the gonads, that is also disturbed. In the intestine is responsible for the absorption of the food material, digested food material, and gonads for the spermatogenesis in male and oogenesis in female. And these functions are totally disrupted. Then liver, it is the main organ of the metabolism. As it affects liver affects, then there is a necrosis of hepatic cells takes place and hypertrophy of hepatocytes. Hmm? Takes place. So total metabolism is disrupted. Then kidney, in that the nephron is a functional unit of the kidney, and as there is a degeneration of that nephron takes place, necrosis of the renal tubular epithelium causes. And there is a glomerular filtration rate is disturbed. Okay, and spleen, it is also important organ of the hemopoiesis, and spleen has a fibrous capsule, and in that the excessive congestion in that spleen takes place. So long-term exposure of fish to that pesticides means there is a continuous health hazards for the population, because the fishes, these are exposed to that pesticides. The various organs of that fishes, these are affected by that pesticides, and as the people consume these different types of fishes, and so that the toxins are entered into the body of human being also, and so that human population is also at the high risk by consuming these toxicated fishes. So we must take the necessary precautions during the applications of the pesticides. For the protection, and the water quality is possible when using the pesticides. If the pesticides, these are selected wisely, they are used in combination with other pest control measures, and if these are applied safely, the population of the surface water and contamination of the aquatic life can be avoided. So the matter of great public health significant to regularly monitor the pesticides. Okay, so and as the people or farmers, these pesticides used in right way, then there may be a less or less lethal effects are seen in a aquatic population. Okay, so hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
हॅलो.
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ, ma'am.
आपला